has been a real pleasure coming to the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China, and the School of International Communication. And this is the key presentation that I'm trying to bring all of you today. So I'll just pull it back here so you can see a bit more of me as I advance on this sort of thing. I'm going to go back into that so you can see it a bit better and get into what we're experiencing. And what we are experiencing is a new age. It is transforming our culture, our politics, our marketing, our sense of identity, and our sense of collective selves. I'm calling this transformation a new era, and specifically a new age of something called influence. And the formation of influence is still connected to past formations of collectives in our cultures, but it is profoundly developed through the movement of ourselves, individually and collectively, into a reformed online, social media and mediated algorithmically and in terms of forms of correlation and curation into a profoundly different cultural world, formations of gatherings, and structures of value. Let's move to the next sort of slide. Where does this very concept of influence emerge? We know that in contemporary studies of social media influence, it is clearly blended into new conceptual phrases such as KOL, key opinion leaders, and influencers. But what is overlooked is that a major study of influence actually was pulled together over 70 years ago and published in 1955. You can see the cover of this here. It was a major research project led by Elia Katz and Paul Lazarsfeld. Now, admittedly, they did it probably 8 to 10 years before it was published, but it came out in 1955. And in that work, they advanced valuable ideas that fundamentally investigated, through surveys and interviews, the way that influence, with its connected to contemporary media forms, was fundamentally reformed and extended through what they identified as patterns of interpersonal connection and shaping how cultures work in the era of media. As the various list of key thinkers that I've kind of put here, Merton and Goffman, as well as Katz and Lazarsfeld, the idea of social influence and transformation is something that Katz and Lazarsfeld advance in a close study of people from the Decatur, Illinois, small city. And now areas such as fashion, marketing, public affairs, and moviegoing were all formed by patterns of relational influence. The key words on the right capture their research. Influence, influentials, and influencees were explored through a series of interviews with women on the specific areas I have already identified. I'll try to pull myself back here. I know it's going to make it a little bit smaller to see some of those things. So where there are individuals that they knew that influenced their decision making? Well, it turns out this research, published almost 70 years ago, captures all these relations and how influence actually worked from individuals to other individuals across our cultures. Their investigation was focused on women in the United States, and they investigated their status, in other words, what class of people they were, and also their female-related lifestyle, from young women, still not married, to those with some children, to those with a large number of children, to those that had moved to post-children, that they called matrons. The status of these people was mapped into where they got their ideas about various activities and who were they fundamentally influenced by. Pull that image up a little bit more so we can see it a bit better. I'm behind it. Oh, you can see me behind. Our series of words helps us understand their very interesting research, the norms that played into what each of us see, the idea of a designator and influentials and other groups of influencees. This work is also connected with the various media forms and how ideas move in a two-step flow model. A key element of their work for us to advance on is that it was conducted in a time of a different media universe, okay, different than ours. Predominantly radio and forms of commercialized press and print, but also the early years of television's integration into American culture and parts of the rest of the world. Admittedly, not at the time that they did the interview, but by the time that the interviews, but by the time they came out of that, that's where they were at. Again, I'll just pop myself back into this. They looked at how account for impact, what kinds of connections between people actually made the two-step flow model from media to opinion leader to wider groups through interpersonal exchanges and communication play out across what they looked at. This is capturing everything. Let's go on to the next slide and see what we can kind of generate here around this. And here is the basic sort of question of this research direction. What real value does this past research have for looking at the integration of a new form of influence social media has on human life and activity? That's the key question that we want to get to. Second one, connected to this because of what I've just made you look at, did Katz and Lazarsfeld capture this changed disconnection? Even imagining the variety of platforms conveyed in this slide, you can see that none of them were in any way, any part of the cultural universe of the people in the 1950s. So in many ways, pull this back down a bit for a second, it is difficult to even imagine that research that looked at how people interacted and were influenced by others cannot capture our contemporary digital reconstruction. So the answer to whether this is the way to go, does it have real value, is partially no. So to a degree it's yes, but it's also something else. So nonetheless, Katz and Lazarsfeld's work does look at human culture and how the wider dimensions of connection, transmedia, transcultural, formations of commercial and corporate influence, the powers of political leadership, how we emotionally feel connected and defer making decisions based on who really knows, is actually leads to, yes, it does have value in some areas to help new research advance to explain our contemporary culture. So the overall answer to their work and applicability to the contemporary is, as I sort of have there, yes and no. I hope that explains a bit more. Let's move on to our next sort of thing. Now, how do we, put myself in the background here, determine this transformation of identity and technologically differentiated para-interpersonal connections? And I am using parapersonal because we all construct strategic identities through online and social media, which produce parasocial connections and parapersonal formations of the self. As my research over the last 15 years has advanced, we are all constructing fictive, not necessarily false, personas. We fabricate these digital reconstructions of the self. And we sometimes make more than one version, whether we are connecting more widely or whether we are connecting to friends and followers, or personal and family constitutions of self. We present and represent ourselves, and these produce new forms of communication that are constructing identity and reconstructing the information into new algorithmically constructed identities and widely commercial and cultural alliances connected to these things. Pull that up and put myself in the background again. We are sailing through this new world with success, but massive numbers of adjustments in our alliances, connections, and our definitions of collectives, associations, as they are transformed by the digital. Let's go on to the next slide. And I'm in the background here for a minute. There are terms that have emerged in different parts of the world that effectively describe transformation reconfigured by our digital persona world. One of these that dominates much of the English world is directly related to this term of influence, generated by Katz and Lazarsfeld and many other communication scholars in the mid-20th century. That word is right at the top there, influencer. And as listed here, influencer is a form of marketing and promotion, a mutated nomination and naming of the digital self. Influencer that connects to particular cultures and collectives. Now clearly in the millions of individuals that are following followers with influencers. It similarly is changing, go back a bit here, our constitution of politics into digital conversions of the interpersonal that are parasocial in transformed notions of closeness and connection. And it is leading to a new formation of how we read power. Influencer is shifting our constitution of associative connections that have massive monetary reconfigurations of our cultures, nations, and collectives. We have role models that are emerging, that are generally also called key opinion leaders around the planet, or what we often use is KOLs. Our task now in research is to determine how do we investigate and potentially work towards improving this changed world. Let's check it out. Okay. Now what we are dealing with, we are dealing with these changes in a transformed allocation of Katz and Lazarsfeld's terms and concepts for future research. I think that's critical. So let's get through those questions that we can get to. Ideas. How do we work out what defines a group now? What is personal in the realm of social media? How do we integrate notions of influencers and social media influence into our 21st century culture? These all rely on valuable literature that I've listed here. And we'll go back to a little bit of picture of me, but maybe I'll have to go back over there to get it a little bit bigger for you. Let's go here again, I guess. Alice Marwick's The Private is Political is valuable. And John Cheney Lippold's We Are Data is also critical. There are others of value. Tero Karpi's work on engagement as a social media corporate form of connecting to users to their platforms. Crystal Avedon's remarkable research on the transformed form of connection in social media forms of celebrity. All of these are critical for understanding this different constitution, if we can call it that, of how influence works now and what we can derive from Katz and Lazarsfeld and other researchers from that era. We talked about Goffman and Merton as others ones. And what do we have to play to make it work even better? On to our next one. Okay. I'll make this a bit bigger so you kind of see it. And this remarkable study of how people have moved into social media influence by Sarah McCorquodale is also valuable. She has a background that connects to this. She maps the attachments that people have made from vlogs in the 21st century to Instagram, and how these are forms of economic and social patterns of power, promotion, and connection in our worlds. Now, we mentioned KOL right at the start. I don't think I need to blow this one up anymore. And we have the equivalent in Chinese and the relationship to social media network. Wang Hong and Wang Lu Hong Han, which refers to key opinion leadership at play in our transformed digital culture. 1 second of blowing it so we can see it a bit bigger. Without me, maybe. It's good to get that sense of what is going on and how all our cultures are playing into this notion of networkizing ourselves. On to the next. And you can see here another kind of dimension that's going on here. We have to work on research strategies that help us map this change in human influence transnationally. And they are listed here with the images of how influencers are drawn into commercial forms of followers and influencers. Drawn commercially, I suppose, no matter what platform they're using. Greta Thunberg, Echo Work, and massive numbers of followers. The efforts of Elon Musk, as you see a little image over there on the right. I can point a little figure at it if it goes there. And which in some ways actually compares to the work that Trump generated as influence in social media politics recently in the American situation. Even the transformation on how we read new and information via communicative influence has created a remarkably different world and different structure to advance on research. We have to work out all these things that are related to communication, but fundamentally related to how do we place ourselves in this new parasocial world that actually is incredibly interpersonal as well, but defined by the technological reconfiguration of those things. To our next slide. Okay, now this is not massive, but a little bit there to see what's going on. So let's go towards a research goal to investigate through a combination of surveys. This is what we have to do, and ultimately into in-depth interviews to ask young and older, potentially individuals, how they connect, how they construct their own forms of influence, how they read the algorithmic transformations of our cultures in the current moment. Our interviews have to be as well developed as Katz and Lazarsfeld's work, but obviously with different questions and follow-ups. We have to understand the global, intercultural, and transnational reverberations of this new age of influence. And our research is advancing to produce a series of projects that relate to place and virtual place, and their ultimate connection to the commercial, political, cultural, collectivization, transformation of influence, and visible influencers in our everyday negotiation with the present and what we perceive as valuable. To help us get to our conclusion now, influence is a major mutation or evolution, algorithmically generated, but also massively connected to the transforming nature of what constitutes connection and value in our contemporary digital world. We are still human. We are still ethnically and culturally and collectively defined. But this movement to pandemically form and complicate persona elements is something that requires a comparative project worldwide. I am hoping this is something that several universities can connect to produce their research understanding of influence. I want to thank you for listening, and I'm open to any of your questions that relate to this new era. But more specifically, how do we build this research culture effectively in an valuable and connected way? Now, it's always valuable to have a little bit of a look at There's massive number of references, and there are plenty more than that, thousands actually, and hence the need for real collaboration as we go forward. So it's important to see what past and current research connects to this area. And it's not that it's going to be straight and forward, it requires a lot of work. Gets us there. But I want to say that that is ultimately really important. So let's advance, when we can, how we may be able to develop related research going forward to understand our transformed influence, capital letters there, world, and all its transnational and regional similarities and differences. And here are I'll show them a little bit more here so you can kind of see them. The copyrights and titles for the images I've added to this talk. I made them all pretty well, yes, all of them in some way. And at the same time, I think it's also useful to thank the people who made the nice flyer that got everyone to come to this event. And so I want to thank the University of Nottingham Ningbo China School of International Communication in generating this related flyer that I have off here to my research. It captures so much in this presentation and about this presentation. I hope you all have seen this presentation, gained something from it. Again, thank you once again, and I'll keep thanking you as we develop the directions of this research into the future. I'm going to stop everything now, but feel free to contact me in whatever way is useful for you as we go forward. Thanks again.